Welcome to the 2024 State of Education and Talent. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm delighted that you're able to join us today for our annual State of Education and Talent report featuring the state of education data, which my friend and colleague Greg Handel will review with you all in just a short period of time. This is the work of our dedicated education and talent team led by Greg in conjunction with many others here at the Chamber, but particularly our research and data team led by Kristen Lucas. And I want to thank them all for their terrific work. And while I'm on thank yous, I want to thank two particularly important partners. First, the Kresge Foundation. The Kresge Foundation, led by Rip Rapson, has been an incredible partner to us on many, many things, but education and talent are certainly among the biggest areas that we have received support from the Kresge Foundation, and we're very grateful. We also want to thank the University of Michigan, specifically their Youth Policy Lab, for their partnership in data, and President Santaono of the University of Michigan for their broader partnership on many things, including innovation, education, talent, and next generation mobility. And also, I want to thank our board leadership. We are blessed to have incredible board leadership, including President Espy of Wayne State University, who you'll see just shortly in this program. But specifically, I want to thank Peter Quigley. Peter Quigley is the president and CEO of Kelly. Many of us know it as the old Kelly Services, who's also not only the chair of our CEO Talent Council that oversees all of our education and talent work, he's also the incoming chair of the Detroit Regional Chamber. So in other words, he's my boss, so be nice to him. Also, in our Detroit Drives Degrees side, we have our Leadership Council, led by our friend, Dr. Ora Peskovich, president of Oakland University, and Jamie Jacobs, the CEO of Ajax Paving. And that group really focuses on bringing the education community and the business community together to solve our education and talent challenges, which we all know are paramount in this region and across the state of Michigan. The Detroit Regional Chamber is proud to be the largest business association in the state of Michigan. We're a team of over 90 people strong and a $30 million budget. But the biggest part of that budget, over $7 million of it, is focused just on our education and talent work. And this includes ensuring that employers get the talent they need for the 21st century global economy. This also includes putting our Lansing-based public policy team to work on behalf of employers, ensuring our education pipeline is productive and producing quality graduates, and specific initiatives on specific industries such as automotive and healthcare. Now, in these areas, we have a myriad of various programs. And one of the things that we've learned over the years as our policy and programmatic portfolio focused on education and talent has grown dramatically is that all these programs were kind of hard for people on the outside to understand. Well, frankly, also hard for some of us inside the building to understand. So today, I'm very pleased to announce an umbrella brand talented. So obviously it's a play on our two primary focuses, talent and education. And I am pleased that even though we have been around since 1903, we are still learning how to ensure that we serve the interests of the business community even better. So this new umbrella brand, Talented, is going to be something that you're going to see quite a bit going forward in the months and years ahead, so we can ensure that we do a better job of presenting our entire portfolio of education and talent programs to the business community and to the community at large. Now, we have been focused on a whole bunch of different things, but they're all guided by two primary goals. First is 60 by 30, and that is to ensure that 60% of our graduates excuse me, that 60% of our population has a 2-year or 4-year degree or a skilled certificate by the year 2030. The chamber pioneered this goal, and we were very pleased that Governor Gretchen Whitmer, in her first term, adopted it as the state goal. And we also are talking about something called K through 12 plus 2, which I'll talk about here. What is K through 12 plus 2? So going back after World War II, the society made a decision in America that a seventh grade education was really no longer sufficient, that we really needed to move to a much more robust primary education. And that's when we adopted the 12th grade standard. And by the mid 1950s, most of America had moved to the 12th grade standard. So the challenge is today in 2024, is the 12th grade really sufficient? We're saying no. We're saying that we need to set the expectation, not a rule, not a law, but more of an ethos that every Michigander, no matter what zip code you're in, no matter what the color of your skin is, no matter what your family situation is that 2 years of schooling, 2 years of training beyond high school should be the expectation. 2 years of associate degree at one of our community college, your first 2 years of a 4-year university degree or a skilled certificate. We need to do this. And we need to do this because our primary industries require it. Let's just take mobility as an example. Mobility and automotive remains Michigan's #1 signature industry, but it is getting more complex even as it's growing more valuable across the globe. We need to help our employers, not just in mobility, but in healthcare and in fintech and in multiple industries to ensure that we are providing them the talent that they need. And when it comes to, automotive, we really need to look at where we are. Only half of Michiganders, according to our polling with Richard Schuba and the Glenn Gariff Group, think we should even be competing in the EV space. Well, I think we have a lesson to learn from the 1970s. In the 1970s, a lot of us kind of misread the threat from smaller, higher quality, fuel efficient vehicles. We shouldn't do the same today. Certainly, we have EVs that aren't for everyone today, but in the short term, it's still a lush market. And no matter what you think of EVs, the global market is moving to EVs. And of course, we have a perception problem. Our Michigan neighbors are not adopting to the importance of having higher education. So we have not seen the voters adopt and feel that a college degree or even a 2-year associate's degree is important. And that's a problem, especially in our more complex environment. And again, this is data that I hope our friend Richard Schuba will talk a little bit more about in just a minute. So with that opening, once again, I welcome you. I thank you for joining us. In the remaining of the program, you're going to hear highlights of the 2024 State of Education Report. You're going to hear from Richard Schuba, the founder of the Glenn Gariff Group, Wayne State University President Kimberly Espy, Senator Sarah Anthony, Marvin Logan of the Rocket Community Fund, and Zoe Clark of Michigan Public. Thanks again for joining us.
Please welcome the Vice President of Education and Talent of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Greg Handel.
Make sure you're on mute, Greg.
Like, sorry about that. I want to thank Sandy for the handoff and just announce that it's great to dive into our first event under our new Talented brand. I want to start by framing today's conversation about data with the reason it's so important to all of us and why the Chamber cares so much about it. If you take one thing away from this conversation, it should be the title of the slide. There's no such thing as a prosperous region or state, for that matter, that is not highly educated. That wasn't always the case. As recently as the year 2000, Michigan ranked 18th in per capita income, even though our post-secondary attainment rank was in the low 30s. That's not a world, that is a world that doesn't exist anymore. And today, Michigan's per capita income, like everyone else's, aligns with its education attainment rate. We are currently 39th in per capita income. The graph on the right side of this diagram shows the relationship between per capita income and degree attainment. On the bottom right, you can see the percentage of adults with at least an associate's degree or higher. On the vertical axis, you see per capita income. What you don't see are communities on the left with low education attainment that are also near the top in per capita income. You can see Detroit in the bottom left corner there. We're near the national average, but we are far behind leading regions like Seattle, Boston, and Austin, or in the Midwest, Minneapolis. The bars on the left denote the lifetime earnings per education attainment level. It's a familiar story. If you look down toward the bottom, you can see that lifetime earnings of a bachelor's degree holder is almost double that of a high school graduate. So what does this mean in terms of employers' ability to fill jobs? If you look at the left, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are only about 8 workers for every 10 job openings in Michigan. And that outlook is even a little bit worse when you look at jobs that require at least a bachelor's degree or higher, where there are 11,000, there's an 11,000 worker gap between the 37,000 graduates we have every year and the 47,000, actually greater than 47,000 postings that require a degree every year. And the ramifications of this are very simple. Employers will grow or locate to regions that have the talent needed to fill their positions. If we don't have that talent, they won't grow or locate here. That's why the Chamber established the 60 by 30 goal that Sandy talked about. This bar shows our progress toward that goal. If you look at 2018, you can see that we were at 50.6% of the adult population with an associate's, bachelor's, or graduate degree, or another high-value credential. That credential definition is determined by the Lumina Foundation that tracks this every year with statewide surveys. So when you add those all together, we were at 50.6%. We've made progress. We're at 53.7% today, but that's not progress that's fast enough to reach our 60% goal by 2030. You can also see the little dark blue gap there. That's the equity gap. And that's the difference between the majority of the population, our white population, and Black degree attainment in our region. It is also part of our goal to reduce that gap by half by 2030. This graph gives us a view of the education pipeline. We do this every year, and it tracks a cohort of students who entered high school 10 years ago. So this is the incoming freshman class of 2013. So if you start with 100 freshmen, you can see that 4 years later, 83 of those 100 graduated from high school on time. 59 of that 100 entered some kind of college institution. And then 6 years after that, 35 of that 100 have some kind of a degree. So 2 big takeaways from this graphic. One, there's no single weak point. We lose significant numbers of students at every step. But one thing I think we should note is that the number of students who start but don't finish college suggests that we can't enroll our way to the 60% goal. We're going to have to graduate our way to it. So this graphic tracks enrollment in college 12 months after high school over the last 5 years. The gray portion at the top of each bar represents the portion of high school graduating classes that isn't enrolling anywhere. And you can see that that is growing each year. The largest drop in enrollment occurred during the start of COVID in 2020, but this is actually part of a decade-long decline that's seen a drop off of 12 percentage points, which also reflects a broader national trend. If we dig a little bit deeper into the data, we can see that the enrollment rate for four-year universities in dark blue in the middle of those graphs has actually held fairly steady. It's only dropped 2 percentage points over the last 4 years. The real swing has been at the bottom with community college enrollment, and that's dropped 5 percentage points over the last 5 years. This is kind of indicative of a trend that is tied to the labor market. So as entry-level jobs are plentiful and pay relatively well, people that would normally opt for community college tend to opt into the job market. When the job market slows down, people opt back in to community college. If we look over to the box on the right, we can see that as a region, our overall college enrollment aligns pretty well. We're actually a percentage point above the national average, but we also see a huge gap, and this is going to be a theme throughout the next couple of slides with what's going on with students from the city of Detroit. And there's over a 20 percentage point gap there. So the two charts here show the graduation rates 6 years after initial enrollment. On the right, we have the graduation rate for four-year institutions, and you can see that it's actually trending in the right direction. It's up 3 percentage points, and we are actually above the national average here, 5 percentage points above it. Again, though, you can see the equity gap, so the gap in terms of the outcomes for Detroit students is very large, 30 percentage points. And if we look to the left, we see a completely different story, though, with our community college graduation rates. It's flat, and it is also very low. It's 11 percentage points below the national average. And again, you see a huge equity gap for students from Detroit, and they are at just 12%. That's just not an acceptable rate. I will say there's some promising work underway funded by the Ralph C. Wilson and the Balmer Group to focus on community college outcomes that's showing some promising early trends. So these pie charts show the impact when you combine graduation rates of 2- and 4-year institutions for students across the region and for the city of Detroit. So on the left, you can see that 6 years after they initially enrolled, 59% of students had some kind of a credential. 31%, though, had dropped out. Another 11% were still enrolled, so still potential to graduate there. Again, this equity gap. On the right, you can see that 58% of students in Detroit, after they had enrolled 6 years later, they have not achieved any kind of credential and they're no longer enrolled. 29% have earned a credential, but 13% are still enrolled. So this shows us the equity gap in degree attainment. The number inside each circle denotes the percent of the adult population from that group that has a degree. So you can see Asians on the far right, a very high number, but it's a very small percentage of the population. So that's not the group that's going to drive our progress toward our goal. It's the other three groups. It's worth remembering that this is a breakdown for students who are, there's a need to address the equity gap. And that's the reason that the strategic plan that we've adopted to reach the 60 by 30 goal includes many strategies that are focused on equity strategies. You can see on the box on the right, we did have an uptick in Black student completion. It's been a one-year blip. We're going to wait and see if the trend holds before we declare victory, but it's an encouraging sign. So given the demographics of the Detroit region, we need to find ways to engage the adult population. On the far left, you can see that we have almost 500,000 people in the region who started college but didn't complete a degree. That's 22% of the adult population, which puts us above the national average of 19%. So this is a group that we can work with. You can see that 23,000 adults earned a degree last year, which is a big number, but it's down 8% from 2013. Again, that's probably an impact of jobs, good paying jobs, and students opting to work full-time instead of trying to balance work and school. Again, a lot of adults come in and out of the higher ed market based on that labor market. The far right is the 300,000 adults. That's how many more we would need to reach our goal of 60%. So you can give, that provides a little bit of a relative measure of that 23,000 a year who are earning degrees, who are adults. I want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the things that the Chamber's been doing to try and positively impact these numbers. As many of you know, that the Chamber administers the Detroit Promise, which provides a tuition-free pathway to a degree for any graduate of a high school in the city of Detroit. So this is impacting that gap that we saw on some of those earlier slides between what's happening to students in Detroit and the rest of the region. So that bar across the top, that line, that is the total number of students who meet every year what we call complete our verification process. And that means they've done everything they need to do to basically walk into a higher ed institution in the fall and enroll tuition free. The line below that is the actual enrollment number each fall, the following fall. So you can see that it shadows that top number fairly closely. So what we're really encouraged by, you can see that in 2022, we kind of hit the trough for the impact from COVID. Those numbers had declined from 2020, but then we started to rebound last year. So you can see that there was an increase last year in enrollment from 772 up to 929. I'm sorry, that's the verification completers. This year, that number increased by 46%. So we don't yet know what the impact is going to be on actual enrollment, but we do know that it's going to trend up. I think one of the most encouraging things for us is that the increase is largely driven by more students from DPSCD neighborhood high schools. So these are schools that in the past often didn't contribute a lot of students to college using the Promise. So we're seeing an uptick, and we're seeing it coming from high schools that typically haven't sent a lot of students to college. So that's an encouraging trend for us. The other thing that we've been doing is involving employers to actively take part in developing talent rather than waiting passively at the end of the higher education pipeline for that talent. So over the last year, and particularly over the last few months, we've had the opportunity to work with employers like Deloitte and DTE and Bank of America to provide workshops, internships, and jobs for students, particularly from the Detroit Promise. We've had a particular focus on working with employers in the healthcare field, seeing employers like Henry Ford Health creating pathways for current staff who are in non-clinical roles into education that can help them secure higher paying jobs and fill critical needs. We've also been working with the new State Department MyLeap, which is focused on increasing the number of students who utilize Michigan Reconnect, which allows adults to enter community college tuition-free, provided they haven't already earned a degree. So we know that a lot of this population is employed, and so we're starting to partner with them to bring Reconnect resources to those employers. And the MyLeap department has been really agile and flexible in terms of meeting employers where it makes the most sense to reach their employees. So we've done lunch and learns, we've done virtual lunch and learns. MyLeap staff has participated in resource fairs put on by employers. And most recently, over the summer, Delta Airlines helped recruit a lot of their staff, as well as employees from around the rest of the airport, to utilize to come to an event where Michigan Reconnect shared resources with them and pathways back into higher education. So definitely strategies that take advantage of a large number of this adult population we're trying to reach at work with their employers and connecting to resources. So finally, we've talked about the headline, but the takeaway into this world to kind of figure out what kind of approaches we needed to take with this population. So only 27% of adults in Michigan believe that college is very important to securing a successful job. 42% of our population, of our students that enroll in higher education ever complete, and only half of the adult population in the Detroit region has a post-secondary credential, while nearly 70% of the jobs of the future are going to require it. So with that, thank you very much.
Please welcome the founder of the Glenn Gariff Group, Richard Schuba.
Hi, everyone. We conducted 3 major pieces of research with the Chamber that I want to give you kind of a high-level overview of what we found. The first was a survey of Michigan voters, and we wanted to get their general attitudes about exactly what they thought about higher education and its costs. So we asked the voters, what's the highest level of education you need in Michigan to be successful? 39% said a trade certification, 30% said a high school diploma. Only 19% said a 4-year college degree. Now, if you have a high school diploma, 44% of those voters said that was enough. If you have some post-high school education, 47% said a trade certification. And if you have a college degree, 41% said a trade certification was enough to live successfully in Michigan. We asked voters, how important is a college education to making a living wage and sustaining a family in Michigan? By a margin of 70 to 23, they said it's important, but there's a caveat on that 70% number. Only 24% of Michigan voters think it's very important. Another 46% said it's somewhat important. Then we asked, is a 4-year college degree worth the money? Only 22% of Michigan voters said yes, it was worth the money. 52% said it is not, and another 23% said it depends on the degree. If you're a high school graduate, only 20% say college is worth the money. If you have some post-high school education, it's only 13%. And if you have a college degree, only 30% say it is worth the money. So we asked them, how much does it cost? And we wanted to know what the average cost was for a 4-year degree at schools like Western, Central, Eastern, and Northern. 20% said it was between $20,000 and $50,000. 45% said it cost between $50,000 and $100,000, and 29% said it cost more than $100,000. Then we very specifically asked the voters what they thought the average debt of a student graduating from Wayne State University was. Only 1.3% said the average debt was under $10,000. 9.9% said the debt was between $10,000 and $25,000. So 88% of voters believe that the debt coming out of Wayne State is more than $25,000, and 27% said it was more than $75,000 debt. The second piece of research we did was we talked to high school parents, parents who had kids in high school right now. And 76% of these parents said that they were going to have the greatest influence in deciding what their children were going to do in their decision after high school. So we asked in an open-ended question, what's their biggest concern about college? Easy answer. 42% said the cost. 15% said the debt. No other concern rated above 5%. So the parents are saying it's all about the money. We asked them, 53% said their child was likely to go to college. But only 46% of parents said they hoped their children would go to college. And the real kicker, 73% later in the survey said their children were interested in going to college. So you had 53% who think their children would go, 46% who hope, 73% are interested. It's a huge gap. And our final piece of research was focus groups with high school students, 75% of which were 11th and 12th graders and all interested in college. What we found was these kids are absolutely in the wilderness when it comes to how much college costs. Only 29% of them said they've done the math. And there's always one respondent that kind of, in a focus group, that kind of brings to life what we see. And one of those respondents said they had adamantly done the math and understood the costs. And so we asked, how much was it? And she said to get a 4-year degree from Michigan State University was going to cost over $400,000. These students speak very much of costs that are exaggerated. They're not sure. And when we asked them where they go, almost to a student, they say they Google it. They go online and they look at what they see online. But they don't have a lot of people helping them piece the money piece together. And so what we see, when these kids talk about financing, they all talk about scholarships. They're going to get a scholarship, but they're not talking about financial aid and what's available to them. So one of the things we found is these kids are simply in the dark when it comes to piecing together what it costs to go to college. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Please welcome the chair of the State Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Sarah Anthony, the president of Wayne State University, Dr. Kimberly Andrews Espy, the director of education and employment at the Rocket Community Fund, Marvin Logan Jr., and to moderate the discussion, please welcome the political director of Michigan Public, Zoe Clark.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. So good to see all of your faces here, and hi to everyone who is joining us. A big thank you to that amazing data dump. There is so much to dig into. That is what we're going to spend about the next half an hour doing. But first, I want to start with sort of a level set, right? After hearing this data, seeing these numbers from each of your perspectives, from government, from higher ed, from the business sector. And I'm going to turn the tables on each of you. As a journalist, I always have to figure out what the headline is, right? After we hear this kind of data. So I want to look to each of you. Senator Anthony, I'm going to start. What is the headline here from this data, from where you sit, from your perch in government?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join this conversation. There's so many people on. And this is probably, we are at a crisis point. I think first of all, I'm thoroughly depressed by Richard. So thank you. Thank you for depressing me.
Cuba is so good at doing that, isn't he? Yeah.
I mean, I think the headline is Michigan makes historic investments in higher education and no one cares. I mean, if we have spent, millions and millions of dollars into transformational investments in scholarships and grants and streamline these processes for working adults and youth who have a pathway to whatever they want to do in life. Yeah. And we've communicated these big programs and it is still not permeating the electorate. We are doing something wrong. And I think that we're at a crisis point.
Yeah. Well, A, I'm hiring you as a headline writer. And B, we're going to talk about perception and messaging, because so much, as I was, spending the previous days reading through this data, that's what we've found. President Espy, your view of this data, your headline from your seat in education.
Yes, so thank you, Zoe, and thank you for the Regional Chamber for this opportunity to hopefully, along the lines that Senator Anthony is talking about, to debunk some of these myths. I must say, as president of Wayne State, I was horrified to hear Richard's results of how much people overestimate the costs of going to Wayne State and the debt that our students take on. In fact, I couldn't agree more that we have a lot of work to do on the communication side, because we have made investments. And it is true, investing in college is an investment, right? And it's an investment around a return. And certainly over the last 20 years, we have shifted some of that obligation to families away from public sources. That is accurate. The actual cost of delivering our business has gone down. Unfortunately, that's one of the untold things. If you look in constant dollars, that's the case. But what I'm here to say is that Wayne State in particular, thanks to the investments by our state and our investing in financial aid, 6 out of every 10 students go to Wayne State without paying any tuition and any academic fees. In my mind, that's called free. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to get that message out. And 4 out of every 10 of those receives partial aid. And so that the number of students that take out debt is the minority. And the amount that they take out on average results in a loan payment of about $200 a month, right? So it really is an investment. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share. Do we have work to do? Of course we do. But I am committed to making sure our Michiganders and our Detroiters have access to a college education to burnish their skills, because fundamentally it's about the competencies that you bring to the workforce that's increasingly complex and increasingly complicated.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's go into that workforce, and let's turn to you, Marvin. And as we think about talent and from your perspective in business and business development, what is your headline when you hear this data?
For me, with the Rocket family of companies and the work that we've been doing here at the Rocket Community Fund, the headline is that Michigan continues to close the gap, but messaging is leaving us in a fleeting situation. We're really proud to, have worked with so many different partners to be able to get more Detroiters into the education and the talent pipeline, and finding innovative ways to do it, where we're creating an impact with hundreds and thousands of folks. But there's so much more work that needs to be done. And one of the resounding messages that this data sends, that we've seen trends in other places, is that the messaging has to get the same level of investment that all of the really other critical parts of the work are doing. With where we've really positioned ourselves in making investments into education in Michigan's emerging industries. One of the biggest gaps that we have seen in this data, corroborates that, is that the awareness is just way askew. And there are so many people that aren't aware of the opportunities that are out there, whether, connecting the educational opportunity or what the actual job opportunity is. There's just this big gap of information that is not getting to everyday people who really want what is out there and what is being offered. And I think that's another astounding thing, working across all of our partners. The moment that people find out that this stuff is available, they're gung ho and they're all in, and they're ready to make it happen. So really, it's up to us. It's up to the rest of the business community, up to the rest of the philanthropic sector, for all of us to tear down our silos and continue working together so that we can close the gap on this opportunity.
Yeah, awareness and perception. I'm going to look to all 3 of you to not have just been journalists in the headlines, but then to be the messengers and ask about what you can all do again from your perches. But let's get back into this question and conversation about perception, because I think it's also one that we're having as a society right now, right? I mean, I want to give a big shout out to the Chamber and to Richard Schuba, because they have been doing polling, not just about higher ed. We talked a lot about the Mackinac Policy Conference, about folks' perception and disconnect with the economy, right? That you hear folks saying, this is the strongest ever economy. But then you ask people how they're doing, and they say, oh, right? So let's talk about this idea of perception and reality when it comes to not just the importance of higher ed, right? Like this idea of what's actually needed to get high paying jobs in Michigan, but this idea of what it means for the state. So what do we make of this disconnect? Marvin, I'm going to start with you this time. What is going on with this perception versus reality? And if you can answer it for the whole entire country too, that would be great. So,
well, I don't know if I'm qualified to do that, but I can take a good stab at it. I think that we live in an age of information where people are inundated every day with so much data, so much information. They're getting it from their social media, they're getting it from their friends. And one of the challenges of the day and time that we are in, the amount of inaccurate information that is out there and available in everyone's face. And really, a lot of it just goes unchecked. We haven't caught up with the speed of innovation and finding out different ways to utilize the tools that can create misinformation and being able to utilize them to create accurate, concrete data that is backed up by something that we can verify. And it really shifts and alters what people think about the impact on their everyday lives. And so that media and digital literacy is critically important for being able to crush these false perceptions. I mean, $400,000 for an undergraduate degree is just mind-boggling that there are people that think that is accurate. And shame on us for not doing the work that is necessary to get that messaging corrected. But really, I think as we've gone into a digital age and we've created more pathways to connect with other people, what is also critically important is coupling that with a physical touch and being able to get that accurate information. The more a student finds themselves on a college campus before they graduate high school, the more likelihood that they're going to be able to be successful. That goes for the parents too. And so being able to open up our colleges and universities to the community in a way that either we aren't doing or a way that we haven't done it in a very long time. And I think those are the kinds of things people have to people. And in order for us to be able to solve this perception problem, that's the only way that we're going to be able to do it is being able to get real critical information out to real people.
Yeah. President Espy, I see you just nodding so much. I'd love to hear from you about particularly you're dealing with students and hearing of this perception versus reality.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Marvin is saying and thank him and Rocket, for example, for their partnerships. So true how much misinformation is out there. And I will say, families will read a story on social media about a student who, went to a very expensive private school in California, right? Studied a master's degree, didn't find, at a slice of time. And those are sad stories. I mean, let me be frank, but they are not the story that our Detroiters here encounter, right? And so it really can skew the narrative to a great degree. One of the things we're doing at Wayne State that I think is critically important is you saw that both Greg and Richard talked about the pipeline from high school to college or two-year degree to the workforce. So we're trying to make those links much more intentional by working with our community from the very beginning, whether it be the for-profit sector and large business or small business, nonprofits. I always remind folks, nonprofits are businesses too, and government. And we have what we call a college to career initiative. And that's meant to align what we're doing in the university, whether it's in the classroom specifically or through extracurricular and co-curricular experiences like internships and mentorship and job shadows, so that students see an intentional pathway, not just when you're a senior and you're working with the Career Center, but from day one, that you're doing the experiences. Like if you want to go be like Senator Anthony, you might start off in student government and then get a leadership role and then intern at a law firm in the summer. And then when you go to finish, you have those sets of experiences and competencies that, coupled with what you learn in the classroom, really set you up for success. So that college to career perspective, so students can see something concrete. Because I understand, when they're making decisions about coming out of high school, a job that pays a fair bit compared to being high school can seem like really attractive, because that forecasting in the future, they have a hard time, thinking about. That's an unknown. So the more we can make that known, the more likely they're going to choose those pathways. Because if you look at students at Wayne State, for example, they're majoring in things that align with Detroit's workforce, whether it's engineering or healthcare and biology, finance, management, criminal justice, right? I mean, so they're voting with their feet, but we need to do our part to make those pathways seamless.
Senator Anthony, same to you. Finally, as we're considering this idea of perception versus reality, something, of course, you don't have to deal with at all at the state government level, right? But I am curious. I mean, what are some tools moving forward when we talk about this disconnect from your purview in government?
So I love having real talk. So if you'll afford me just to have a little bit of real talk
The
here, and
platform for real talk is all yours.
thank
Please
you.
and
And
thank
I
you.
preface it with I have already drank the Kool-Aid. I spent 10 years at the Michigan College Access Network, sitting at the Detroit Chamber, helping to build things like the Detroit Promise and Detroit Drives Degree. So like I'm with us. But I have to elevate us a little bit to what a significant portion of the populace is saying. They perceive higher education as this elite fraternity that some folks are worthy of and can afford, and some folks cannot. Some people do believe that four-year institutions in particular are these factory for liberal ideas. There's this notion that young people who come from all walks of life and different experiences, the moment they step foot on these campuses, they are met with woke culture. They are policed. Their speech there's no longer an ability to just think outside the box without being perceived as being the next victim of cancel culture. We see a generation of young people who see their parents saddled with student loan debt, and they do not want to repeat those same mistakes, regardless of the tools that are before them. So they do not see the direct line between the 2 or 4 or 5 years that you spend in a classroom and a pathway to generational wealth. They are seeing, to the president's point, I would love every young person to see a pathway to elected office, starting with taking political science classes, being in student government. The highest office in this land is a guy that his first job in government is president. So I would love for us to ignore this growing anti-intellectual, anti-college narrative, but the financial barriers that many of us have worked for a generation to lower and have provided all types of tools to make college free or darn near close. We are being met with this wave of misinformation and a generation of young people who do not want student loan debt by any means and are not seeking out the best avenues for sound information. So I think that there's tools that we have available, but we as folks who believe in these higher education institutions have to also do some soul searching about ways we can make it faster and easier for folks to get the piece of paper after college and not view that piece of paper as my my card to the next elite upper crust luncheon or breakfast or society's next thing. It has to be a direct line to providing for not just my family, but the generation behind me. And I think we've got some work to do there.
Yeah, President Espy, some work to do and some real talk. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, so let me first say I am so grateful for Senator Anthony and her work. We've had a lot of opportunity to engage in dialogue, and you can't always count on her with respect to, giving real talk. I agree relative to the misperceptions about what we're all about. Wayne State has always been a university of opportunity, right? We're one that has allowed folks who are adult learners to come back and get the competencies, because that's really what a degree is a marker of, is the skills and abilities you bring to the table. It's actually not about the piece of paper, right? It's a shorthand of the talents that you as an individual have honed through an educational experience, right? There are all sorts of ways to do that. And I must say, Michigan has a distinguished history in skills-based training that has allowed our populace to be successful. But when you look at the economy that's coming, the trades, that requires an awful lot of new skills. It's data science. Think of the folks who, the Watson commercial, right? The guy who goes to fix the elevator. It's an AI elevator. You need more than a wrench, right? And some of that is college level skills. And Senator Anthony is right. We in higher ed can do a better job. And I think the stories of places like Wayne State is a really important counter narrative. And I'll be the first one to say Wayne State has not always been the most at the forefront of telling our story and being proud of that story. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to do so, because we're very fortunate in Michigan to have some outstanding institutions that are committed to being that engine of opportunity.
So I'm an optimist by nature. I can't help it. So in this final time that we have, I want to look at how we can use this data for good, how we can take away this data to build, right? I'm curious to hear from each of you when you see these results, when you synthesize these results, where do you see opportunity, right? Where do you look and say, okay, to Senator Anthony's point, this can be depressing, but we've got some work to do and we're going to do the work, right? And my guess is most of the folks who are on this call today want to step up and do the work. So let's spend some time talking about doing the work. And I'm curious again, from each of your points of view, from business, from education, and from government, where you see there's some opportunity, right? And Marvin, I want to start with you from business. Where do you see an ability to make some change moving forward from this data?
I think first and foremost is continuing to demystify what corporate opportunities are and what are the barriers to get to them. One of the things that we've really enjoyed working with Wayne State University on is how can we find innovative ways to get people in a space learning about a career opportunity so that they can figure out, okay, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, how do I get there? And how can we kind of break down those barriers, invite other companies to find innovative ways to find the talent, because it's out there. I think that's the immediate thing that pops out. And then secondarily, that 58% of students that are not that enroll but don't complete the degree within a 6-year period. As a first generation college student myself, and having had many experiences with many others like myself, I remember times where we were broke and hungry, where we had friends who bounced around on our couches for semesters because they didn't have a place to stay. There are so many things that get in between that journey from point A to point B, and hyper investing in the middle part of that journey is how you get persistence to graduation. And then let's make sure that when we're shaking that hand with the student and they're turning the tassel, that we make sure we do the work to continue to build bridges so that there's something waiting there for them. And that is something else, again, that I'm happy to see Wayne State leading the charge on. And here with the Rocket Community Fund, we're committed to continuing to find more innovative ways to do that creates that opportunity for a placement and a job opportunity for students.
Yeah, innovation, particularly, I wrote down notes to myself because it's just, I don't want to take this all away, but this idea of the pipeline and then the links between each step. President Espy, I'm curious to hear from you. What's your takeaway and where do you see this as an opportunity for some change?
Well, it is so true. We are so lucky at Wayne State and to Detroit generally to be at a place where our metro city links arms and focuses on problems head on and tries to get them done. I mean, this is a great example of this forum here. I couldn't agree more with how do we use innovative methods to reach even further into the high school pipeline so we can turn that knowledge in a different way. In some ways, I would argue we're fortunate in Michigan that the cost of living is somewhat lower. So I think that's some of the basis of Richard's data and people perceiving that in order to be successful, it's a different skill set. But when I think of success, it's also the ability to, contribute meaningful to your community, to vote, to have health insurance and things like that are really dependent upon the knowledge economy. So the more we can reach into high schools, the better. And how to use innovative methods, because students do over-perceive the barriers and under-perceive the assistance. Much like the same with those who have stopped out or dropped out. Programs like I saw in the chat, the Reconnect, and Wayne State has Warrior Way Back, right? That facilitates coming back. We're very fortunate that much of our courses are organized so you can take courses on the weekends and in the evenings to fit around your work, because by and large, adult learners work, right? So you have to fit school around life. unlike when you're 18, where school might be your life, right? And so, we're thinking as best as we can of how do we accommodate those different learners and their needs. So we'll have math and all sorts of different formats to accommodate that, right? But I'm really bullish on how do we work with DPSCD, for example, and maybe do some of the new directed missions. I'm working with Alicia Merriweather of beginning to explore a pilot targeting those neighborhood high schools, because I think that's an area that we could do more to make it clear that, hey, you're welcome at Wayne State. Come on, we're part of the Michigan Achievement Admissions Pact, and you can be successful here because we're committed to your success.
Okay, Senator Anthony, where do you see some opportunity? As you mentioned at the very top, historic investment. So where can we go from here?
So one of my proudest moments in the legislature was when I stood alongside one of my colleagues in the House, Representative Ben Frederick, and our two bills helped create the Michigan Reconnect program. And we have seen that build and grow and expand. And under my leadership in the legislature, we've continued to fund it. My hope is that as we enter into divided government in this next legislative term, that we can continue to see both Republicans and Democrats prioritize post-secondary education and training, not politicize higher education, and continue to make alignments with chambers, not just the Detroit Chamber, right, but the chambers across the state. Organizations that oftentimes don't see themselves squarely within the post-secondary educational attainment conversation. But as my grandma always says, we all have a nickel in the dollar. And so my hope is that we can lift up the same energy of bipartisanship to both create more pathways for students, but also sustain what we've already started to invest in. These are lagging indicators. We won't start to see the fruit of many of these investments long beyond any of us in our current positions. But I just hope we can stick with it and not politicize these types of transformational investments in education and talent. So that's what's keeping me hopeful, is that we've done it before in a bipartisan fashion. I think we can keep it up.
Well, I think we should end on that moment and that note of hope and help. Senator Anthony, so grateful to your time. President Espy, thank you for everything you're doing at the university. Marvin, Logan, appreciate you and your work. And thank you to the chamber and, of course, the absolutely amazing Richard Chuba, bringing us so much impactful data. And to everyone who joined today, I hope you have a great rest of your day, week, and a really happy Thanksgiving with you and yours. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.